So my name is Matt,
I'm Blake.
and this is our presentation for the WCCC site that we created this semester. So how do we develop a specification? Well, after our first contact with one of the board members, Jesse, we weren't able to actually meet with our client for a whole month after our first contact. So it was a little bit of a challenge to try and come up with ideas to present them with. So our initial way of doing that was just looking at the old site and deciding what we wanted to keep and what we wanted to improve from it. Things we wanted to keep were the blog posts and board information. Both of those we felt like were pretty important to their message and obviously just important information to have on their website. And we wanted to improve the design and page clutter problem that was going on with their old site. As we mentioned in our presentation before, there was just a lot of, their first page was kind of confusing to look at and just a lot going on. So we wanted to make our design nice and remove a lot of that page clutter. And we also wanted the ways to get involved for the coalition to be as clear as possible and have those things be one of the first things that people see when they get to the website.
So when we were finally able to meet with them, it was a really constructive meeting. We pitched our ideas that we developed during that initial stage where we were looking at the old site, and they liked all our ideas and also had a lot of ideas to contribute. So by the time we left, we had a good plan for what we were gonna do moving forward.
So the nature of the product they wanted dictated our means of designing. We really had to design the site a lot based on their needs. We wanted to work within a framework that would allow them ease of access for website management, and that was one of the biggest things that they wanted. So being able to add and delete blog posts, adding images, create, update, and delete functionality on all things they wanted to change. So adding database entities that reflected this functionality was among top priority. And we also chose the Laravel stack because with very few commands, we were able to get a lot of structure just out of the box. And it was extremely helpful to use it.
So this is kind of just a structural overview of what we built. There's a couple things on here that we're still integrating because they just gave us that information, but basically it was, once we did one thing, it was really easy to do it for everything else. We would create a model and then add the controllers that allowed you to do all that CRUD functionality and then point to it with a route. And that was basically everything. So we were able to do that with elements of the page. So changing things like the carousel and the feature and headers and stuff, but also the things like blog posts and board members, and eventually the guide services and meeting minutes as well.
We tested the site using PHP Unit and currently working with a new testing framework called Laravel Dusk, which is an automatic browser tester. I would say our most effective testing was the user testing done by the client. They had a couple board members come in our second meeting, and that was extremely constructive. They gave us direct feedback of different features, what worked and what didn't work, and gave us a lot of new ideas as well as important information. And so after that second meeting we were able to get a more complete idea of what they were looking for in the site, as well as their opinions on the things that we had on there. So we were sort of just able to test it on them. As far as individual contributions, I worked mainly on the graphic design end of things, the front end of the website. So designing the carousel, making certain design choices about where certain things went. Also being able to dynamically display a lot of the database information, reflecting the model that we created through the database. So looping through the board members and the posts and stuff like that, and making it display in a way that looked natural.
So I worked on the back end and did kind of database management. I'd figure out what needed to be a model, and I'd make the model, do a migration, and make sure the database had that model. And then I could write a controller to add all the functionality and then a route to point to that. And as I said before, I just repeated that process for every entity that we had in there.
As far as design choices, we chose the design of the site to be similar to most nonprofit organizations. So just starting out, we sort of looked around and looked at a couple of different nonprofits to see what the main themes and motifs of the sites were. And what it seemed to be like was just a lot of relevant images on the site, clear ways to get involved, contact information being featured, stuff like that. So that's all the stuff that we wanted to be prominent features of the design. We also tried to keep the design as simple as possible, seeing as their old site was much too overwhelming with all the text. So we thought that a more simple design would be a more effective one. And we also took a lot of great ideas from the coalition about where they wanted certain information. So originally we had a lot of information clumped together in sort of awkward ways, and after that second meeting, they were able to help us sort of figure out and order that information into a better design. As far as what I learned on the project, I really haven't done any web development before, and it was a totally new experience for me. I knew a little bit about Bootstrap and PHP and sort of what both of them were and what they do, but I never really had used them hands-on. So it was definitely a crash course this semester on being able to write and use both of those. I learned a lot about Laravel, the MVC framework, and front-end web development as well. And the other thing I would say that I learned is the ability to adapt to the needs of a client. For all the things that I've made at CMU, it's always been for myself or just for an assignment with a simple rubric. So getting exposure to the process of adapting to other people's ideas instead of just being able to create things for myself was an extremely helpful experience. Sort of was just a taste of what real world development looks like, and having to suppress a lot of your ideas, or having to absorb the ideas more of your client, I feel like was a very helpful experience.
So for me, on the technical side, I get the Laravel stack was I learned that a lot. I'm used to MVC frameworks and kind of that separated presentation pattern because I've used it before in like Django and stuff. But just learning that specific file structure of Laravel and the ORM that comes with it. Also, like Matt said, working with a client and turning their kind of vision into that technical model was a huge thing that I learned. Having to kind of sort through their ideas and make it come to life was a really, really good process. And lastly, the biggest thing I learned is just kind of the domain knowledge of what goes into making a successful nonprofit site, and will influence their impact and increase donations. So I'm really used to like learning this technical stuff, but at the end of the day, that was the most important thing that I learned.
We found it pretty useful to be able to make really good relationships with our client as well. So it was a really nice and fun process to be able to shoot back and forth and be able to basically, like Blake said, just like see their ideas come to life. And we maintained a really good relationship with our client throughout the process, and it was a really good experience overall.